Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me in this second part of a two-part series on data manipulation techniques within Scalyr. My name is Joel Mora, and I'm a technical account manager here at Scalyr, and I'm here to talk to you today about redaction and rewriting. Redaction and rewriting has a multitude of use cases, and there are many places you can do this within the product, and by the end of this video, you should know how to do all of them, and you'll be able to see some live examples of how they work. Redaction and rewriting is really useful in controlling how data is displayed within the product. So I think the easiest thing to do here will be to start by talking about the data pipeline. So let's start in your data center, and as your applications and your servers function, it's going to be emitting logs. In this case, it's going to be writing logs to a disk, and you will have the Scalyr agent most likely installed on your servers, and it's going to be looking at a particular file. In this case, it's going to be var_log. And the agent is going to take everything in that directory and it's going to process that. So the way it processes it first is it's going to sample the data. So in this case, it would be like discard 20% of everything. And then once it does that, then it's going to go through the redaction step. After the redaction step, it's going to ship the data off to the Scalyr data center via the REST API. When the data moves from your data center into the Scalyr event data cloud, the event data cloud is just going to be picking up logs via the API. From there, it's going to go through another step, a redaction step called preprocessing or scrubbing. What that's going to do is just allow you to write a centralized set of rules that are going to rewrite the data before it's ultimately parsed. Then the parser allows you to both discard and rewrite data. Parsers are very powerful, and it's going to allow you to do both. Once the data is parsed, then it's going to go to the cost management step, which allows you to have a centralized repository for all of your discard roles. From there, the data is going to be available to you to use in the Scalyr UI, and then you also have the option to utilize one of the many integrations, such as Grafana or Google Data Studio, or just grab at it at the regular REST API. So that's how the data pipeline works. Now let's talk a little bit about redaction.
So logs that match a pattern can be removed or replaced or hashed. That's the essence of redaction and rewriting. It's relatively straightforward. There are different places that you can do so within the product, much like sampling. And those places are kind of what I talked about before in the whole pipeline. In the next slide, we're going to go over some of the trade-offs for each, and then we're going to go into a live demo for each of them as well. So they all use regular expression rules, but they do use different regular expression libraries, and there are some limitations depending on where you actually put it. And there are definitely performance considerations when it comes to the types of regular expressions you use. So that's the basic information on redaction and rewriting. Now let's talk about where we can redact or rewrite. So in the agent, within scrubbing and within the parser are all the places that we can do so. And in all three of them, we can rewrite data. The regular expression groups are not supported within scrubbing, but they are supported within the agent and the parser. In the agent, if you utilize the redaction rules, then the data is not going to leave your data center. So that's a big thing to consider. If you use scrubbing. So with that, there are some benefits as well. You could manage everything in the Scalyr UI, and it's a lot more centralized, whereas the agent, you either need to use a configuration management tool, or you really have no way to centralize everything. You could easily toggle scrubbing rules, which is a really nice benefit to doing that. But scrubbing does not support regular expression groups, and you cannot hash data. But you can hash data within the agent. There are a lot of performance considerations to consider. If you're in the agent, you're going to be using the Python RE library, and there's really no limit to what you can do in terms of the regular expressions that you define within that library. The performance considerations to consider are CPU and memory. If you're sending data over the pipe with scrubbing in the parser, it's important to consider that you're going to be using the Java library. And due to the necessity to make regular expressions as performant as possible. The regex does not support lookarounds, and that protects us and your account from a customer possibly writing something that could cause issues for everybody. So the same thing is within the parser. It's important to note some of the limitations around the regular expression syntax. If you rewrite fields like the message field or any field with a lot of data, it's really important to also consider the performance implications of that. And I would consider moving that upstream if you're going to be rewriting fields like message. So with that, let's get into the demo. All right, so let's take a look at a demo. So much like we did last time, we're just going to start sending logs to Scalyr. And let's take a look at the logs. So we're just sending some basic logs. We have 401s, 500s, and 200s, and it's just repeating. The important piece in here is that we have a token within this login endpoint here that we're hitting. A token is being written in the logs. And the ultimate goal here within our redaction is to remove it before we send it to Scalyr. So let's do that. So let's take a look at our agent config. And what we are doing here is we're just taking a look at this one path and writing the logs to Scalyr. This script is writing to this log, and then we're moving into Scalyr. So let's take a look at Livetail and see what's actually streaming. So here we go. We have everything streaming into Livetail, and we can see this path token is coming in. That path token is getting parsed from this token here. The goal is to redact that token. So I have the redaction stanza set up here, and this just goes in under each path, just like the sampling roles. So we're attaching an attribute, which is the parser, it's called parser name, and then we're attaching redaction roles, and then we could have n number of redaction roles here. So let's talk about the anatomy a little bit more. The first thing we have is the match expression, and the match expression is basically looking for a fragment of the line, and if it matches, then it's going to replace it with whatever we have in the replacement field here. Basically like any search and replace, but it's powered by regex. So what we're doing here is we have two groups. We have group 1, which is token equals, and then group 2, which is going to be the actual token. And this pattern is just going to pull the token. And then what we're going to do is replace the whole thing with asterisks. So if we save this, and one thing that I also like to do is just watch the Scalyr status as well, just in case I write any bugs. But it looks like we're good here. This will change if I were to write anything, if I were to mess anything up. So now let's move back into our Livetail and see what happens. And there we go. So now we can see that this token is being replaced by the asterisks. And let's take a look at the raw message and see what's actually happening here though. I just have these defined using a table view, but if we look here, what we can see in the message is we have get login, and then where it said token equals and then the token, we just have asterisks. So one thing to note is that we can bring down regular expression groups here. So let's do that. And I'll show you how that changes. So in order to bring a group, we would bring group 1 here. And then if we wanted to bring group 2, we could, but the group 2 contains the password. So that's what we're redacting. So let's save that. Move back to Livetail. Check our config. We're redacting the password again, or the token again. If we click into a line, we should see the token has been replaced here. The other thing we could do, instead of sending just stars, we can also hash it. So we have group 2 here. And I said we could bring in group 2 if we wanted, but we could also bring in a hashed value of group 2, which is what we'll do now. And let's take a look at livetail. And then here we go. Here's our MD5 hash of the password. And then the last thing we can do with this hash is we can add a hash salt if we wanted to as well. So if we save that, go back into livetail, and there we go. We have a different hash value coming in with the hash salt. So that's a prime use case for redacting within the agent. Now that we've done this on the agent and we know how this works, let's take a look at some downstream options. So let's go to the next piece in the pipeline that we saw earlier, and that's going to be scrubbing. So let's move away from the agent. Let's keep our log streaming, and we will go into the log processing page here. To get to this page, just click the drop down here and click log processing. It'll take you here, and it's going to present you with a form to create your first rule. So the first rule we're going to create is and then it's going to ask you for a source log file or a logline filter. Let's do the server host, and then we're going to do the path as well, or the log file is the name of the field. So server host is here. But we really can use just the Scalyr search syntax here. And then for log file, we're going to take this path. For match text, we'll just take the same rules that we used last time. So token equals the token pattern. And then for replace with, let's just use a different, just so we can differentiate. And there we go. It might take a second for the rule to work. You could add multiple rules. You could clone rules here if you wanted to as well. And then you could order them as well, and they're going to execute in order. So let's take a look at our data. In order to do that, we could just press test filter here. And it's going to take us to where the data is being redacted. And we can see that it's done that. Some things to note are, if we move back here, it doesn't support log groups, so there would be no way for me to pull this group down and write it here. And it also doesn't support MD5 hashing as well. So the only thing you can do is match text and then replace it with something. So speaking of the pipeline, let's move downstream to the parser step. And the first thing we'll do is we'll just delete this rule so we have fresh data streaming in. And let's go back to our data. And let's find our parser. Parser for this particular one, I just called parser name. One thing we can do is just do an empty search and click on this parser. And we can see our redacted data coming in. The rule should take effect, the one that I just deleted, soon. But if I open just any log line and I go to edit parser, this will allow me to edit these rules within the parser. So now that we're in the parser, we just have a basic format coming in here. And what we're doing is we're just parsing the IP address, the user, timestamp, pretty basic parser. But what we can do is we can add rewrite rules. And this is very similar to what we were doing before. I'm going to talk about this piece a little bit. And what this is going to do is exactly what we did in the agent demo and what we did in the scrubbing demo. If you're going to be doing what we just did in terms of like information security or redacting passwords and such, I don't really recommend doing it in the parser because first of all, it's easier to do in scrubbing or in the agent, and there are a lot of benefits to that. I just want to show you that it is possible to do that and some things to consider. The first thing we're doing is after we've parsed everything, we're just going to match anywhere where that token exists. So first of all, you can see some pretty complex regex just to find the proper match. And then you have the message field. And then let's just take this one step at a time. So right here, we're pulling in parser token. We're setting this field to parser token. If I create my rewrite here, it's going to take an input, which is path token, which is this that we just took. Output is going to be path token as well, so we can change this to whatever we want and it'll write to a different field name if we want. We're going to match everything that path token is taking, which is if you recognize this pattern from before, it's the password pattern. So we're taking the whole password and then we're going to replace it. And then, so let's test that. Let's update sample. Here we go. Yeah. So we can see path token was replaced with our replacement here. But one thing we can see is in the message field, that token is still there. So that's the reasoning behind this second thing here. And this is where I say be very cautious if you're going to do this. This feature is supported. You can rewrite the message field. I don't recommend writing the message field unless you absolutely need to rewrite the message field. So if you're going to be doing this security use case, I highly recommend you do this upstream. But you can rewrite the message field, and there are some good reasons to do that. But if your message is 50 kilobytes and you're scanning through the entire message at a really high rate, you're going to likely cause performance issues. But if I rewrite the message field here, we can see that the token is now redacted here, and the token's also redacted here. So you can see that we accomplished the same thing in the parser. It took significantly more rules and effort to do so. So here's some more realistic parsing patterns that we can see. One is to just replace input text that's coming in. So we have the input as user here, and then we have the output is going to be user. So we're just rewriting this field. If it's Peter, then we're going to replace that with Annie. If we move here and look in the user field now, Peter is Annie. Something more realistic would be taking a look at the path that we have. So this path is login, and we're deriving information from this /login path. So maybe if somebody's hitting this endpoint or something, then that implies that the service is going to be the authentication service, something like that. So we have the input as the path, and then the output as the service. We're matching the entire path field, and then we're going to set service to authentication. So if I test that, here now we have a new field here called service authentication. So this is a pretty prime use case for rewriting. So if we save this, and then we move back here, we can see there's no service coming in. We can see the token has not been redacted. We'll wait for the parser to take effect, which should take just a few seconds. And then here we go. So now the parser has taken effect, and we can see that this is redacted. We can see Peter has now been changed to Annie. And now we have a new service derived called authentication. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope you got something out of the tutorial, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.